Alright, I am Tahuti Kepura Iteru. Now, this video right here, I want to break down the deep occult science of melanin. This right here will be the deepest video I've ever made, right? Now, first things first, I want to say Ashe to the master teachers, Bobby Hemmit and Dr. Delbert Blair, right, for their research into melanin, because without their research into melanin, the thought that sparked this video wouldn't even be possible. So I want to say Ashe to those two master teachers right there, right? So let's get straight into this. So now, what is melanin? Melanin is the cosmic amino acids of creation. Melanin is the essence of creation itself. Melanin is the alien, right? And the white man studies this alien every day, right? Now, black people, we don't have melanin. We are melanin that got trapped and condensed into a human form and now expresses itself in a human form, right? Melanin is the building blocks of creation itself. If creation was a chemical process, melanin would be the environment that even allows the chemical creation or the chemical reaction to take place. It would be the catalytic converter that speeds up and regulates the reaction. Melanin is dormant creation. Creation would not even take place without melanin. Melanin is the creation process. Melanin is not the product of the Big Bang. Melanin is not the Big Bang, but melanin is what even allowed the Big Bang to take place, right? So now beings with melanin are essentially creation beings that can create anything, can become anything, but they themselves were not actually created, but because they are creation itself, so they have no start date or an end date, they just existed, right? So again, going back to this again, melanin is the building block of creation itself. There is no creation without melanin, right? Now, this is why the sperm cells and egg cells are coated with melanin. It's not for protection as previously thought. The reason why the sperm and egg cells are coated with melanin is because that creation process and that union between the egg and the sperm would not even take place without melanin. Melanin is the reason why that process is even possible, right? Right, so again, and the melanin in the body appears to be black, as black is a state of dormant creation, right? A state of dormant creation. Now, if melanin was so great, did the ancients talk about melanin? Now, at first, when I was doing research into this, I thought that melanin was the god Amen, right? But Amen is one of the 8 Ogdoad. In Egypt, you have this Ogdoad, and the Ogdoad, which also includes the waters of Nu. The Ogdoad are frog and serpent beings, right? So the male deities, so-called male deities, are the frogs, and the females are the serpents, right? So the female counterparts are the serpents, and the Egyptians saw that the frogs would spontaneously generate from the mud, and the serpent sheds its and again the serpent sheds its skin, which is a symbol of immortality. And we went over this. So the frog represents the metamorphosis, but in terms of energy, the frog represents the potential energy to become anything, right? The potential energy to become anything, right? So the Ogdoad is the potential energy of the waters of Nu, and in the mythology, so in the mythology it says that the Ogdoad, when they came together, they were chaotic, right, and produced a mound, and from that mound birthed Ra, right? But the Ogdoad have no record after that event, so it says that this mound was symbolic of the end and the death of the Ogdoad. So again, going back to this, the god Amen is not actually melanin, because Amen was in existence before Ra, and as we've mentioned this before, Ra is the soul. So how can melanin be in existence before the soul, right? So Amen is not melanin. But it turns out, so when I went into this, it turns out the Egyptians never actually wrote about melanin. Not because they never knew about it, but because the knowledge of it corresponded to their hidden occult practice of alchemy, right? For example, all the people that were embalmed were black, right? All the people that were embalmed were black. There were no white people that were embalmed, right? So there were no white mummies. So the priests that were embalming the bodies, they would have to have had an understanding of melanated skin, right? And because melanated skin is different to non-melanated skin, so they would have had to have had an understanding of melanated skin. So the formula in which they used to be able to preserve the bodies, the embalming formula to preserve the bodies and the mummies and preserve the bodies, right? They would have corresponded to their knowledge of melanin as well. So they would have kept the knowledge of melanin, their knowledge of melanin hidden, along with their knowledge of alchemy, right? Also, what Bobby Hemmit spoke about how was melanin used to be called occultum, the hidden substance, right? The hidden substance. Also, so now the soul and melanin go hand in hand. Melanin is the essence of the soul. The soul is the particle of the creator, right? And melanin is how the soul creates. So the soul is like the mind of God, and melanin is what brings the thoughts into existence. Melanin is the fabric of creation itself, right? Now we're going deep into it now. Melanin is the cosmic brain, the synapses of the universe, and the synapses is the space between the neurons in the brain, and the synapse is how the nerve impulses travel. It's how they travel, right? So melanin being the cosmic synapses is how the universe, is how the ideas or the thoughts of the mind of God are then manifested into the universe, right? But melanin itself is an alien entity. Melanin is this alien entity that got trapped into a physical body. So you are not a physical body with melanin. You are melanin lugging around a physical body, right? So how this works is that the soul is the extraterrestrial. And what the soul does, the soul carries melanin. It carries around with it melanin. It carries with it melanin. And this is how it conducts its thoughts, right? So the melanin is like the body of the soul, but a body in a scientific term, a body doesn't have to be a physical body. A body in a scientific term can just be a container of something. So you have the body of a cell, which contains the nucleus, right? It's not a physical body, but it's just a body. So a body is just a container, really. That's what a body is. So when your last video, when I spoke about this doll body, the doll body is melanin, meaning that the doll in the sense that it's not alive, but it's a body in the sense that it contains the ISBE, which was the soul, right? So this is where the alien comes from. The alien is when the melanin adapts to that specific environment or to that specific atmosphere, right? And it takes on a form conducive to that specific planet. So that's how it works, right? It takes on a form specific to that specific planet. Again, but we'll go further into this, right? Let me see. Yeah, we'll go further into this, right? Also, melanin is also the memories of the soul, right? As when the melanin takes on the form, that alien form of that specific planet, it will remember this form, right? And store that as information. So therefore, black people, before we were human, we was an alien entity. The human is a new being. That's why a lot of black people, they resonate with this alien stuff and this alien information, because prior to this human form that we're in right now, you was once an alien entity. You see what I'm saying? But this human being is new. So now, going back to what I was saying about the forms right here, this is what the cartoon Ben 10 was talking about. As in Ben 10, he has this Omnitrix. He has this Omnitrix, right? Which is the type of watch that attaches itself to the skin. Now the Omnitrix stores the DNA. Now the Omnitrix stores the DNA and is synced with the DNA of Ben. So it's talking about how, but again, this Omnitrix is an archetype of melanin, and it's talking about how black people's melanin, right, contains the DNA of all extraterrestrial beings, and that melanin contains the genetic information of all these beings, right? So all these alien beings. So in other words, black people contain the cosmic codex for all alien beings within their DNA, right? So black people can take on the form of any extraterrestrial. as melanin is the alien. But these alien forms are the physical bodies, so to speak, that melanin had to accumulate to be able to live or exist on those planes and on that specific planet, right? So, but again, those aliens that you see, those alien forms, are still made up of the same essence that is melanin and the soul. That's all it is. That's all they are, melanin and their soul. And that form is the alien form that they took on based on the melanin becoming conducive to that specific planet. So that's the alien right there. So that's right there. We're breaking the mystery right there. So that's the whole alien thing right there. So we are not. So we are not the body. We are melanin, an alien entity that got trapped into a physical body, right? And got reduced to mere skin pigmentation. It got reduced to this, but it's really an alien entity, right? So now we're gonna go deeper now. Now we're going deeper into this now. So now they say that aliens built the pyramids, but where did these aliens go? These aliens are still here, but they got trapped into the epidermis layers of your skin that we now know as melanin. So that's the alien right there. So junk DNA, right? So again, the junk DNA is melanin right here. So the sleeping gods that we talk about, the sleeping gods is none other than dormant melanin, right? Dormant melanin. So now we're getting into this right here. So now I want to break down how the reason why we can't build pyramids today. I want to break this down. The reason why we can't build pyramids today is because of one simple thing. One thing that you thought would actually aid you, but it's actually a detriment to you. And that one thing is the human brain. Now we're going into this right here. It's the human brain. Now the brain keeps the mind locked down, and it will only deem things possible to manifest based on what it can actually rationalize and fit into a logical equation. The brain, a good analogy for this is what I came up with, right? The brain is essentially the child's playpen. It's a child's playpen with a limited So when you imagine a child's playpen, right? A child's playpen, so it's with a limited amount of room to build things, right? And limited resources to build with, right? Which also include, and this playpen also includes cages and guards watching and enforcing, so that way you cannot build too vast or too big, right? And those guards are fears and phobias right there. They're fears and phobias. So simply put right here, the brain is the enemy of the gods, right? The enemy of the gods, the human brain right there. Now, so again, but the reason why that is because the reason why I broke that down with the human brain, as the reason why for us not being able to build pyramids today can't just, because a lot of people say the reason why it's the language we're using. It can't just be the language we're using, right? It can't just be the language, so it can't just be the language, and that we had the same biology as we do today, as we have the same brain as the white man. We have the same brain as him, but the only difference is our level of melanin, right? But our melanin only gives us a little bit of an edge over him. So he can still, so in the 100 meters, he can still run 10 seconds, but the melanated man can run a 9.5 second, right? So it's only a little bit edge over him. He can still run the 10 seconds, right? So, but the pyramids, in comparison to his structures, it's a huge monumental gap. It's not just this gap, it's a huge gap. So the beings that built those pyramids couldn't have just been simply intelligent Africans. It couldn't have just been that. They must have had a completely different neurological system. Their brain had to have been different. The nervous system was different, right? The way they were processing information was just different. That's the only explanation right there, right? That's the only explanation. So now going back to this now, the reason why we were able to build pyramids goes back to what modern science calls the evolution of the human brain. And they talk about the different layers of the brain, and what they talk about the evolution of the brain is that the brain started off with the base brain, and each brain got stacked on top. This is what they teach in this evolution stuff, right? With this evolution of the brain, they were stacked on top of each other, and the lowest part of the brain is the reptilian brain, right? Which they call the primitive brain, or whatever, the primitive brain. But the reason why we were able to build pyramids now was because our brains were not fully developed. right? So what happened was that we were using the melanin as a medium for our thoughts, right? We were using the melanin. So rather than use the brain, we were using the melanin was able to bypass the brain. And because the brain was less developed, the melanin could now bring into manifestation things that the brain could not rationally conceive to be possible, right? So now we're going deep into this now. We're breaking the mysteries right here. So now this is where your whole supreme mathematics comes from. They say God has supreme mathematics, and the pyramids were built using supreme mathematics. But melanin is the supreme mathematics, right? And so melanin converts sunlight into electrical energy. Just imagine the type of mathematics that is going through to do that process right there, right? And also, if melanin is able to adapt to specific environments and take on the form conducive to that specific environment, right? Imagine the type of mathematics that it is processing just to take on that transformation. So melanin is the cosmic computer that performs advanced calculations, right? Melanin is this cosmic computer right there. So now going back to this right here. At the time of the pyramids, all we had was the reptilian brain. That's all we had. This is where your whole reptilian concept comes from, right? They say upright walking serpents used to walk the earth, but the upright walking is the spine, and the reptilian is that lower brainstem. That's the reptilian right there, that lower brainstem. So what happened was this. All we had was the reptilian brain, and the reptilian brain, the white man speaks about how the reptilian brain controls the basic functionalities of your physical body. But the rest of our brain was melanin. So the logical reasoning factor was melanin. So all we had was the reptilian brain, the lower brainstem right there. Then the rest of the brain right there, the rest of the brain was melanin. See, that's the key right there. The rest of the brain was melanin. And what happened over time now, other brains started to form. So we had the reptilian brain right there. And then other brains started to form. Then came the limbic system. Then over that, the neocortex, the prefrontal cortex. All these different brains started to form now. And now melanin got trapped inside the brain, which we now call neuromelanin. So again, we're breaking the mysteries right here. But now I want to go deep into this right here. But now the closest replica to melanin is crystal. Crystal is the closest replica to melanin on Earth, right? But the white man uses a quartz crystal oscillator in his computers, cell phones, and radios. And that quartz crystal oscillator, this oscillator, is the basis for his technology to even work, right? But the crystal doesn't supply the energy. The crystal creates the framework for the energy to be able to communicate with itself. Right, to communicate with itself. But neuromelanin is this quartz crystal. So what am I saying here? What I'm saying here is that without neuromelanin in your brain could not even function. Without neuromelanin, your brain wouldn't even function. That's the key, right? That's the key to this. So previously thought melanin aids in the conduction of nerve impulses, but it's not even that. It's deeper than that. Melanin doesn't just aid in the conduction of nerve impulses. Melanin is the conduction itself. So that conduction, that's the melanin, right? So without neuromelanin in your brain wouldn't even be able to send the signals, the nerve impulses, to be even able to communicate with itself. So that's deep right there, right? That's deep. So now, so the basis of your brain is melanin. Neuromelanin is the foundation of your brain, right? So the first brain was melanin. The first brain was melanin. So this is why when you go on Wikipedia now, they say that the function of neuromelanin is unknown. They don't know. But yet this is the same man now that would try and teach you about black holes, and he has all this knowledge about black holes, but yet he doesn't know what neuromelanin does. He knows what it does, but he can't tell you what it does. He can't say what it does, because if he tells you what neuromelanin does now, based on what I've just said, the whole evolution theory goes straight in the bin. It goes straight in the bin because it doesn't add up, right? So the reason why the ancients were so advanced is because they had less developed brains, right? Thus, they were thinking directly from the melanin. They were using the melanin as a type of supercomputer, right? And they were not limited to the logical, rational constraints of the neocortex, prefrontal cortex right there. You see what I'm saying? They weren't limited by that. So now this is where the function of the pyramid comes in. I originally thought that. So I've done a video on the pyramids. Most of you have seen that by now. But in that video, I originally thought that the pyramids was a tool to enhance your melanin. But you are melanin, right? You are melanin. So the pyramid was actually a megalithic cosmic defibrillator, right? Defibrillator, right? That would electrically charge and wake up those sleeping gods, as the sleeping gods is dormant melanin. So that's the key right there. So again, so the ancients knew that the melanin itself was God, the melanin itself, right? And they knew of ways and practices to tap back into that God. And some of these practices again was light deprivation and fasting and things of that nature, right? So they knew of ways to tap into this dormant God, which was melanin, right? But now here's where it gets even deeper, right? As they knew that the brain was the enemy, and that was keeping us locked down. So this is why you see Akhenaten now and his family. They saw Akhenaten and his family as divinity because they had the elongated heads. So in other words, they had some type of deformity or whatever in the head or deformity in the brain. But the brain is keeping their God self locked down. So now a deformity in the brain or a condition that makes the brain not operate in its conventional way would be considered divinity. Now you see where we're going with this right here. You see what I'm saying? So this is where autism comes in. They say that autism is a mental disorder, right? So the brain is not operating in the logical, rational way, which it should be, right? So in other words, this person now has the capacity to offset their brain's reasoning, right? And tap straight into the God, which is melanin, right? So in ancient times, so there would have been autistic people in ancient times, right? But they knew what it was, and they could use these people for ritual purposes and channeling to create scripts and artworks, right? That could be used to allow other people to tap into that inner God as well, right? So now going back to the so-called evolution of the brain, right? As the brain got more developed, the brain began to adapt and become more efficient at completing mundane tasks. So therefore the melanin got pushed further away and we became more human and more condensed, right? So the white man tricked us when he said that the development of the brain was an advancement and that it was an evolution, meaning that it changed for the better, but it is really a detriment and it's actually primitive, right? It's primitive because the human brain is not actually advanced, it's just more efficient at doing mundane things, right? So this is why the white man will never be able to build pyramids, because of based on the human brain that he has and also his lack of melanin. So he can't, because of his lack of melanin, he can't use his melanin to be able to bypass the human brain and tap into the melanin as a cosmic computer to be able to manifest higher concepts. He can't do it. All he has is human brain, so he will never be able to build pyramids. His brain won't allow him. His brain won't allow him to do it because he knows how the pyramids were built, right? But he has no way to really replicate it. He has no way to even move a stone of that size because his logical, rational brain won't allow it. It won't allow it. It won't allow it to be possible. You see what I'm saying? That's what happened right there. It won't allow him. So the white man himself, with his human brain, makes him primitive, right? As a lot of the technology that the white man builds is not actually advanced, but it's actually efficient. So it's not advanced, but it's efficient, right? That makes his life run more smoothly, but it doesn't actually enhance it, right? As cars, for example, cars can get you to places faster, but the more people that have cars means the more cars on the roads, thus the more traffic and congestion during peak times. Thus, now walking actually becomes the faster option. So you built the car to go faster than walking, but then when you have more cars on the road now, there's more traffic and more congestion. Thus, now walking, which you originally built the car, you know what I'm saying, to improve, now becomes the faster option. So again, you can see the predicament right there. You can see it right there. You see what I'm saying? So again, it's not advanced. It's just efficient. Right? So in closing, right? So that right there is the end of the video right here. So in closing, melanin is the alien, right? That got trapped into a physical vessel. But this melanin was once able to bypass the brain as a means of calculating and solving problems, right? But then as the brain became more developed, right, melanin got locked down and could no longer be utilized, and now was subject to the brain and got reduced to mere skin pigmentation, you see, and became dormant. So this right here is the story of the fall of gods into man. Alright, so again, so that is the end of the video right here. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you took some good information from this. Alright, black people. Thanks for watching.